Before the season started, we were talking about Carlos Rodón as a possible dark horse Cy Young candidate. Early on in the season, that looked to be a good prediction as he was utterly dominant and one of the best pitchers in the league. He had a little bit of a blip in the middle of the season, but he's turned it on again ever since. So what is the status? Like, how good is this guy compared to the rest of the league? And what is his future with the Giants? And a big milestone is about to be passed for him. So we'll talk about all of that next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Hey Giants fans, you are going to love this. Today's episode is brought to you by the Sports Card Investor app. Welcome to the world of trading cards reimagined. Stay tuned later in the show for more information on this awesome new tool for collectors. You're going to want to check out the Sports Card Investor app. And you're also going to want to check out what we're going to talk about next, which is Carlos Rodón, because he went out there and just had another very good start last night in this highly entertaining and tense game against the Detroit Tigers. And the Giants were able to pull it off in large part to Rodón having just yet another very good pitching performance. If you look at the runs allowed per start for Rodón, like if you actually look through all of his different starts this year, he's only allowed more than 3 runs in a single start one time. And it was that Sunday Night Baseball game against the Cardinals. And then besides that, he's only allowed 3 runs like a couple of times. And then a bunch of 0s, 1s, and 2s. It's truly amazing how consistent and good Carlos Rodón has been. So as I said there in the open, we were talking about him as a dark horse Cy Young candidate. Then it looked to be a good prediction. Then there was that little blip with the Cardinals. And then a couple starts later, he wasn't super crisp either, but overall the body of work is just among the best in the game. Rodón has a 2.62 ERA. Strikeout rate is among the leaders in baseball as well. When I look at, it's funny, when we look at Fangraphs wins above replacement in all of Major League Baseball, this is only qualified players. This is not a number that should require qualification. It's a cumulative stat. So anyway, I'm sure no one who's unqualified is up there, but it's funny. The top 2 guys in baseball are Kevin Gausman and Carlos Rodón. But Fangraphs WAR is based on FIP, not ERA. So for Gausman, he's got a 2.93 ERA, but a 1.71 FIP. And so that's why he's where he is. But based on actual results, Carlos Rodón has been better, even though the wins above replacement is lower. So Rodón with a 2.62 ERA and 2.31 fielding independent pitching comes in second in Major League Baseball in Fangraphs wins above replacement. His strikeout rate, Carlos Rodón's, is 5th highest in Major League Baseball among qualified pitchers at 30.3%. The strikeout minus walk rate is 8th in Major League Baseball. There's just dominant numbers across the board. And yeah, so what's so interesting about Rodón, though, is his contract status with the Giants. It is just a 2-year deal, but he has the right to opt out of the second year if he reaches 110 innings in 2022. And so he's already at 86 innings pitched. What's also funny about the Gausman and Rodón thing, it's just crazy that Gausman was not someone people thought of as a frontline starter before the Giants picked him up. He had the potential always in his career, but the Giants basically have found the 2 best pitchers in the game right now in Rodón and Gausman, or at least 2 of the very best. It's pretty incredible. And I get it. There's all this talk about should they have signed Gausman. And we've gone on and on about that, so we'll save that for another day. But with Rodón, it's worth talking about because it could be another Kevin Gausman situation where he has a good year, in Gausman's case, a couple of good years with the Giants, and then he leaves for a much bigger contract. Rodón could be setting himself up for that. So he's at 86 innings pitched, and I think I didn't even make the point I was trying to make, which is what's crazy about Rodón and Gausman is they also have the same number of starts and the same number of innings, exactly. So that's interesting. But for Rodón, 15 starts, 86 innings pitched. So he is creeping up there towards that 110 inning mark. And once he passes that, he obtains the right to opt out of next year's contract with the Giants. And that contract is just $22.5 million for 1 year. And so for me, if he passes 110 innings and essentially just finishes the year without some kind of major injury, then he's almost certain to opt out. And the question is, like, opting out doesn't mean not coming back to the Giants. It just means reaching free agency again. And if the Giants wanted to bring him back, it would be under some kind of new contract, not just for 1 year, $22.5 million. And the reason for that is that a 1 year deal is a 1 year deal. You know, if you are a very good player who's not old or anything, and you're one of the best pitchers around, you have every right to seek out a long-term deal, like Kevin Gausman got 5 years, $110 million from the Toronto Blue Jays. And so for Rodón, he has more of an injury history, and he's also kind of a late bloomer, but so was Gausman. But to me, he seems to be on a course where you could definitely make a case that he would be worthy of that type of contract when this season is over, assuming he passes the 110 innings, opts out, and is relatively healthy when all is said and done. And so where would that leave the Giants, though? Where would that leave their starting rotation? Because from where I'm seeing it, they would basically have to start over and try to find the next Carlos Rodón. But what about the rest of that rotation? So coming up in just a minute, we're going to look at next year. And if Carlos Rodón opts out, but before the Giants make any moves, where would that leave their roster? And is Carlos Rodón a candidate to be brought back? So we'll look into those questions coming up in just a minute. But first, whether you're a casual card collector or looking for exciting alternative investment opportunities, the free Sports Card Investor app has something for you. As players like Adley Rutschman, Jeremy Pena, and other exciting rookies make the jump to the big leagues, you can use the free Sports Card Investor app to check the prices and buy their first baseball cards. And also, with the free Sports Card Investor app, you can pull out those old cards from your favorite childhood players and see how much they're worth today. This is super useful. I have so many old baseball cards, and you can just open up the app, search for the player, search for the card, and find the values. It's an incredibly convenient tool. So download the Sports Card Investor app today. Available for free in the Google Play and Apple App stores, or go to sportscardinvestor.com/lockedon. Also, I just must say it, it's a exciting alternative investment opportunity as well. Even if you don't have cards already, you can just build a portfolio. So go to sportscardinvestor.com/lockedon today. All right, as promised, we're going to continue this conversation. We'll also look a little bit at last night's tense game for the Giants. They were able to escape a threat by the Detroit Tigers. The Giants jumped out to a big lead, and then the Tigers chipped away. They got the bases loaded, down by just a run in the 8th inning, and the Giants bullpen was kind of collapsing, but they got out of it. So we'll get to that and an exciting roster move that is made before today's game a little bit later on. But I want to finish this conversation about the state of the team, because there's a lot of talk every year these days around the Giants about spending and not making a huge splash in free agency. And I understand that talk. But first of all, I was a big fan of the way they were able to get Carlos Rodón on a short-term deal, because when you look at long-term deals for pitchers, they often don't work out. And we went in the offseason through numerous examples. We looked back 5 years ago. Who were the top starting pitchers from 5 years ago in free agency? And you're like, what? those guys were ever considered top guys who should be getting $100 million. It's insane. Like Dallas Keuchel, who just recently was DFA'd and picked up off the scrap heap, but they go down quickly. And so to get an ace caliber pitcher like Rodón without the long-term commitment, I thought was a good thing for the Giants. But so let's just assume he opts out, because for me, he's on a course to opt out. And it doesn't say anything about the Giants. It's about Rodón and his contract, because he's earned it. He's pitching great. He's 29, and he is in line for life-changing money. I mean, he's already making life-changing money, but really life-changing, like generational wealth is what he's in line for if he can just keep pitching this way for the Giants. I mean, he really is a Cy Young candidate still, and I would put him up there against pretty much anybody. There are some other guys who might be ahead of him right now, but he's right in that conversation. So if you can like be a Cy Young finalist, have a great year, hopefully lead the Giants to the playoffs, maybe even pitch in the playoffs and pitch well, then he's in line for a big payday. So if he opts out, that would leave the Giants without their biggest commitment financially. And so it would clear a lot of committed money. The Giants also have Brandon Belt reaching free agency. He's making $18.4 million. Jock Peterson, Matthew Boyd, Wilmer Flores, Jose Alvarez, Kurt Casale, Dom Leone, and some club options for Evan Longoria and Jake McGee. And so in terms of committed money for next year, it's $92 million, including Rodón. And so if you take Rodón out, you're down under $70 million committed. And right now, according to Roster Resource on Fangraphs, their payroll, the Giants, is about $163 million. And so you're taking about $100 million off of that, potentially. I think that's including Rodón. Yeah. Regardless, I mean, basically the way that they've set up their payroll is that each and every year they have the ability to reset and kind of move on from guys who are not performing well. They're not committed like financially to anybody over some ridiculous term. Not that I am opposed to that for certain players like Harper, Betts, Trout, like these types of players. If you can get them long term, do it. But the Giants don't have that. I'm not saying they never will. There are some stars reaching free agency again this winter, but basically what I'm saying is the Giants would have the ability to do whatever they want and kind of pivot. And the thing about Rodón, and I just looked this up, or I saw this on Twitter. I can't remember. I think it was the Pitching Bot is the Twitter name. And they were putting out something about decline in certain pitch types. And what they said was that the fastball, I believe specifically the four-seam fastball, was the pitch most vulnerable to decline over time. And basically after a pitcher hits 30, and by the time they're 35, like the steepness of the decline of that specific pitch is much steeper than other pitches. And so for Rodón and for the Giants being a savvy team, I just have to believe that they're not going to be the team to give him a 5-year contract, given that his fastball is the number one pitch. And the reason for that, I mean, velocity, number one. If you just start to lose velocity, then Rodón is a completely different pitcher. If he's not able to go upper 90s, if he's more low to mid 90s, he's just a completely different animal. But that being said, maybe short term still on the table if he wants to go high AAV short term, like 3 years, perhaps. But I think that the Giants would be in a position to pivot to some other spot, whether it's another starting pitcher who's undervalued and you can get him on a short term deal like this, or a position player, or both. But where would the Giants' rotation be? And this is the thing that's significant, is they would be in a much different spot than they were in coming into this offseason when they had almost nobody signed. They just had Logan Webb under contract, but that was it. And so they had to bring back multiple starters. They sign Rodón, they bring back DeSclafani, they bring back Wood, they sign Jakob Junis, they sign Matthew Boyd, and that was pretty much it. But still, that's a lot of moves. But where the Giants would be next year is that obviously Webb is still under team control. Logan Webb is under club control through the 2025 season. It would be his first year of arbitration eligibility. I think Logan Webb is potentially an extension candidate. Maybe you buy out maybe you buy out all the arbitration years in exchange for adding on a couple of free agent years at the end of it. That is a possibility for Logan Webb. But regardless, they can keep Webb for the next 3 seasons after 2022. So that's great. And then and I forgot to mention Cobb as well, was someone they brought in. But for Wood, he's under contract for next year. DeSclafani under contract for 2 additional years. Alex Cobb under contract for next year, plus a club option for the year after that. And so their rotation is in a much more stable place. And Jakob Junis is under club control through the 2023 season. So 1 more year for Junis as well. And so they're in a much better spot, and in a spot where they can kind of, basically, if they want to, just kind of focus on one pitcher, I would think. Because that's a pretty full list already when you're talking about Webb, Wood, DeSclafani, Cobb, and Junis. That's 5. And so they have a history of, they don't want just 5 starters. They need that depth, and they've needed it this year. They have depth, and they've still kind of run out of it at times. But so you've already got 5 solid pitchers, and you might be saying Wood and DeSclafani are not solid. Well, they were really good last year, and so you're putting way more weight on this year and like ignoring last year. I'm not going to do that. I think last year still counts. I still believe in these guys. Wood is pitching today. Hopefully he turns a corner. And DeSclafani, I mean, he's been hurt. I'm just going to give him a little bit of time to try to right the ship. But they're in a position, to me, from a starting rotation standpoint, to just maybe make one significant move. Like, you could try to bring back Carlos Rodón on a short-term deal, but assuming it doesn't happen and he ends up on a long-term deal, he probably goes elsewhere. But Jacob deGrom is likely to hit free agency. He's had his major injury issues as well, but that's another reason you can get him on a short-term deal potentially, and he's older, and so there's a possibility there. You've got Chris Bassett, a little bit older, reaching free agency, so that wouldn't require a long-term commitment. You've got Clayton Kershaw. I never, ever think he's going to end up anywhere but LA. Sean Manaea is reaching free agency after this season, and he's obviously got Bay Area ties. Joe Musgrove is a very good starting pitcher reaching free agency. And kind of on and on. Noah Syndergaard, Jamison Tyone, Justin Verlander can opt out of his deal. So there are some intriguing pitchers, and I think the Giants are in a good position from a starting rotation standpoint. And then the payroll is kind of just opened up in addition, and so I know some of you are thinking, they're not going to spend, they never do. Well, yes, they will, because even if you're at, like I said, if Carlos Rodón opts out, you're at like $70 million committed. They consistently run payrolls north of $150 million. So you're still talking about spending on the 2022 team an additional $80 million versus what would be the case at the end of the year when these guys reach free agency. So I like the position they're in. It's a much better position to be in than the alternative, which is to be stuck, committed to a bunch of guys who aren't performing well, which was the case at the end of the decade when the Giants started to play poorly and have a bloated payroll. That is a much worse position to be in than to be in the flexible financial position that the Giants are in. And they can kind of pivot every year. Say you feel good about your rotation, you can just focus on some of these position players who are out there, like Judge, Trey Turner is out there, and just undervalued guys as well. So there's a market for everybody, and I think the Giants are in a good position to be able to scour it from all angles. Not saying they're going to end up with those guys necessarily, but they can scour it from all angles. So coming up in just a second, we'll highlight this game a little bit and talk about an exciting roster move that got made prior to the start of Wednesday's game. So all of that in just a second. But first, whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand, 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. And as you know, for me, I much prefer the convenience of being able to do this from home than going to a store and having to deal with that whole scene. When you're talking to a salesperson, you don't necessarily know what you're doing. You feel like you're getting swindled, perhaps. But if you can do this from home, that is a game changer. So make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Giants listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code LOCKEDON, that's code LOCKEDON, plus every order is insured. Ships free and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? What if you don't know? Embarrassing and ineffective. And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership when you can look up the part yourself, save a bunch of money, buy it yourself, and bring it wherever you want, even to the dealership, and they'll be happy to install it for you. So it's a no-brainer. I really have done it myself a lot. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, as promised, we're going to quickly talk about the Giants' tense 4-3 win over the Tigers on Tuesday. To me, I mean, certainly not a must-win game in June, but an important game for the Giants because, look, the Cincinnati Reds just came into town and took 2 out of 3. Giants lost 2 out of 3 to the Reds both times. They played them, and so the Tigers come in with a record of 28-44. I'm not taking them lightly. They've got some talent on that team. I think we saw it with Riley Green. Spencer Torkelson is a big power threat, even though he didn't come through. He came up in some tense situations where he could have done damage. Javier Baez has been hot, but Carlos Rodón was really good. Camilo Doval saved the day out of the bullpen, and the defense was much better. The defense was a story for the Giants in this game, like all across the diamond. Evan Longoria making some nice, smooth plays at third base. Thairo Estrada playing a solid shortstop. Darren Ruff digging some balls out of the dirt. And specifically Mike Yastrzemski making a couple of Gold Glove caliber plays, including on the first play of the game. Had to run 111 feet into foul territory and made a running catch, which just set the tone for me. And it's crazy. It really does seem like the Giants get a lot of difficult plays every game. They're not getting so many routine plays, just ground balls right to people. They've got these pop-ups that are just like right in between guys, and they've got to make a tough play. But yesterday they made those plays. And for Yaz, he also threw out Javier Baez on a ball off the right field wall. Baez trying to go to second base. It was just a perfect play off the wall and a perfect throw to second base to nail him. And then Miguel Cabrera late in the game hit a line drive to right, and Yaz just made a really nice running, leaping catch in the right center field gap. So great game for Mike Yastrzemski defensively and the whole team. Like I said, Rodón was great, as we know. John Brebbia, a little bit shaky in his inning. Dom Leone got 2 outs in the 8th, but then ended up a run in and the bases loaded. So it got real dicey, but Doval came in and kind of settled things down. He got a big strikeout with the bases loaded. The game was on the line right there. And it feels like that's the type of pitch and game the Giants have not been able to make and win this season. Like when it's just all is on the line, they seemingly have not made that big pitch. They've not made that big play, but they were able to do it last night. Yes, it's against the Detroit Tigers. Yes, Jonathan Scope swung at a pitch that was 3 feet off the plate, but still, the Giants need to play that way. And Gabe Kapler said it the other day. It's like the Giants are beating themselves, and when they play well, they can beat anybody, as we saw against the Dodgers. And when they play poorly, they can lose to anybody, as we saw against the Reds. And so I don't care that it was the Tigers. The Giants played their game, and if anything, maybe offensively, I wish they could have done a little bit more. But Tarek Skubal is really good, and they worked him really hard, and he threw a lot of pitches and only went 4 2/3 innings and threw well over 100 pitches. So Duvall gets a gold star as well, close it out in the ninth, and it was just a nice, clean game for the Giants. And then prior to Wednesday's game, the Giants activated Lamont Wade Jr. So that is a big deal. The Giants have really not been healthy this year ever, pretty much. And Wade is a platoon player, but a good one, and someone who can make an impact against right-handed pitching. So he's active for today's game. By the time you're listening to this game may already be over. But Wade is in the lineup. Yermin Mercedes was optioned back to Sacramento. He was in the lineup against the lefty yesterday and had a hit, and we'll probably see more of him at some point, maybe. But seems clear they view Mercedes as a platoon guy on the short side, meaning he plays against lefties. There are fewer lefties, so we call it the short side of the platoon. But anyway, it's good to have Wade back. Hopefully, Luis Gonzalez can come back soon. This would have been a crunch issue. Like, what would they have done if Gonzalez was healthy? We don't know. But when Gonzalez is ready to come back, what are they going to do? So that's a question for another day. And that is all the time we have for today. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name's Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow, talking about today's game, Alex Wood on the mound for the Giants, Wade back in the lineup. So thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.